My baby, and she was so dumb.
This is Dick Marple. Arthur Richard Marple was a Republican member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives. In 2015, he was pulled over and charged with driving without a license. However, what caught the media's attention was his lengthy rant and outburst in court in 2016. Some believed his rant had a deeper purpose. Let's see what you think.
I am here under threat, duress, and coercion. I'm not here because of an order. Because you as a magistrate cannot make an order. You have no jurisdiction to judge your own jurisdiction. You have no decision because you don't have any jurisdiction. You come out with what's called an order. You can't make an order because you're not a judge. You either obey the law or you are in violation of your oath of office. I want my property back. I asked for it 4 times. You refused to give it to me. That's conversion. That is conversion. Criminal conversion.
In the end, the court still found him guilty of driving without a license. However, he left behind a message that continues to resonate across the country.
Is the people that I represent are being ripped off. That's what it's all about. And if you're going to continue with this, you will be paying the penalty, I assure you. I'm not participating in something that cannot exist. It is a total fraud.
Marple sadly passed away in 2019, but he will be remembered for his advocacy for the sovereign citizen movement. The new federal courthouse in downtown Salt Lake City was busy with the usual mix of attorneys, jurors, and security. But for 25-year-old defendant Ciale Anguilao, it marked the start of a day that would end in chaos. Anguilao, a member of the infamous Tongan Crip gang, was facing serious charges, including racketeering, and was linked to a series of crimes like assault and robbery. He was the last of his gang to go to trial. After seeing 16 of his gang members sentenced to up to 30 years in prison, you might think Angelo would behave himself. Spoiler alert, he didn't. In a move that seemed straight out of a courtroom drama, Angelo assured the judge that he would be harmless, convincing her to let him sit without handcuffs in front of the jury. Now picture this. The courtroom's first witness, Viola Tenifa, is testifying about gang life. Suddenly, Anguilao stands up, grabs his lawyer's pen, yes, a pen, and charges toward Tenifa as if he's running the final leg of a relay race. Witnesses described the scene as total chaos. Anguilao jumped over the witness stand, holding the pen like a weapon. Then, chaos broke out. A U.S. Marshal quickly drew his weapon and fired. 4 bangs rang out, and Anguilao was down, his life ended by his own actions.
Drop it out of your hand. Drop it out of your hand.
This real-life incident ended with Anguilao being fatally injured, leaving the courtroom full of shocked witnesses. What followed? A mistrial was declared almost immediately. Judge Tina Campbell, who witnessed it all, later said she might have underestimated how quickly things could escalate. No one expected an ordinary day in court to end with firing.
There's no question, though, you can turn a pen into a knife, or its equivalent. You can take somebody's life.
Afterward, people questioned whether the marshal's decision to fire was too extreme for someone armed only with a pen. The FBI didn't think so. They cleared the marshal, saying he acted appropriately to protect others in the courtroom. However, Angelo's family disagreed, arguing the force used was excessive, though the court didn't share that view.
It's easy if you slow down the video to maybe argue or suggest that there was enough time to do something different. When you watch it live, it's very hard to see that anything different could have occurred.
Justice can move fast, and so can chaos. Keep calm, stay composed, and perhaps it's best to leave the pens where they belong.
Calm down.
It's tragic that his case ended abruptly with the harshest outcome, death. This is Kirsten Lobato. She spent 16 years in prison for an act she didn't commit. At 18, she was accused of ending the life of a homeless man in Las Vegas. Although initially found guilty of first-degree murder, a retrial led to a conviction for voluntary manslaughter, with a sentence of 13 to 45 years. After 16 years in prison, new evidence revealed during a hearing proved the victim's death occurred while Lobato was 3 hours away with her family. This made it clear she couldn't have committed the crime. Here she is, stepping outside as a free woman for the first time.
I feel overwhelmed, I feel excited, I feel grateful, I'm so happy.
Kirsten Lobato has filed a lawsuit against the Las Vegas Police Department, and her compensation claim is still in progress. On May 4th, 2018, 35-year-old Christopher Clay Rudd, who was facing substance charges, tried to escape from a courthouse in Spanish Fork, Utah. Wearing handcuffs and a yellow prison jumpsuit, Rudd casually stood up and walked out of the courtroom. When officers pursued him, he began to run. Surveillance footage captured it all. One camera showed him leaving the courtroom, another caught him running down the hallway and jumping over a balcony. A third camera recorded two men attempting to catch him as he fell into the lobby. Rudd fell headfirst over the railing, spinning in the air before landing about 20 feet below on the tiled floor. He sustained a broken leg, pelvis, and skull fractures. Authorities were uncertain if he intended to hurt himself or if it was a desperate escape attempt. He was taken to the hospital where he was treated for non-life-threatening injuries. Rudd was scheduled to return to court, now facing extra charges for his escape attempt. Spencer Boston, a 20-year-old man, caused a stir in a Tennessee courthouse when he made a statement in favor of legalizing cannabis by lighting a joint in front of the judge. The courtroom was business as usual, handling case after case until Boston's name was called. Charged with simple possession, he approached the bench, but things quickly took an unexpected turn. During his appearance at the Wilson County Courthouse in Lebanon, Tennessee, Boston pulled a joint from his jacket and lit it, taking a few puffs. Security quickly stepped in and detained him. Before being taken away, Boston reportedly shouted, "The people deserve better." He was sentenced to 10 days in jail for contempt of court. On January 27, 2020, Boston apologized through his lawyer, who explained it wasn't a stunt. Boston accepted responsibility, paid his fines, and served his time for both his traffic violation and contempt charges. His lawyer expressed Boston's regret to Judge Haywood Berry, but noted that he will continue to peacefully protest what he sees as unfair cannabis laws. Boston was originally in court due to a traffic stop in November, where he was cited for speeding and simple possession. His next court date in Wilson County is set for March 17th, according to jail records. Amanda Spudy appeared for her sentencing hearing after being charged with drunk driving and felony death by motor vehicle for a 2010 crash that claimed the lives of her friends. In 2010, 20-year-old Spudy, along with her friends Sasha Adela Hoffman, 18, Taylor Lee McCaskill, and Scott Wayne Bedwell, 23, headed to a party after drinking at a friend's house. Spudy, with a blood alcohol level of 0.20, more than twice the legal limit, lost control of the car while driving 90 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone. The car veered off the road, struck a street sign, and crashed into a tree, splitting the vehicle in half. All three passengers died at the scene. During the hearing, the victims' parents shared emotional testimonies, with Scott Wayne Bedwell's father addressing Amanda directly, his words filled with deep sorrow.
You can still talk to your mother. You can cry with your mother. And eventually you'll laugh with your mother. I cannot. I want to hug my boy.
Taylor McCaskill's grandmother also shared some heartfelt words during the hearing, speaking through her pain as McCaskill's parents wept in the courtroom.
My life has been changed forever. And Lord, I know you can't possibly need Taylor as much as her mother and I did.
Spudy broke down in tears during each of the testimonies. At one point during the hearing, she emotionally addressed the court, expressing her deep remorse and sorrow for the tragedy.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I suffer from it every day of my life. I'm so messed up. I suffer from this every single day of my life. I will for the rest of my life.
Amanda Spudy was sentenced to 7 to 12 years in prison for aggravated felony death by motor vehicle. On March 11, 2005, a horrifying event took place at the Fulton County Courthouse. Brian G. Nichols, a man on trial and desperate to escape, carried out a violent plan that shocked the city and captured the nation's attention with its brutality and the following manhunt. Nichols was in court for charges of rape, kidnapping, and assault against a former girlfriend. His first trial ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury, leading to a second trial. Before that trial, Nichols' family and friends were worried he was planning to escape with help from a friend, but no one expected the level of violence that was about to happen.
March 2005, when Nichols escaped from the Fulton County Courthouse that touched off chaos in the streets and a massive manhunt.
On March 11, 2005, Nichols was scheduled to appear in court for the start of his trial. His plan began when he violently overpowered Sheriff Deputy Cynthia Hall. In a brutal attack, he took her caliber Glock service pistol and beat her so severely that she ended up in a coma. Now armed and wearing civilian clothes, Nichols went on a violent rampage.
Brian Nichols, who was originally in court to be retried on a rape charge, overpowered a Fulton County deputy inside the courthouse, beat her and stole her gun, and that was the start of a deadly rampage.
He came across 2 case managers and an attorney, holding them under threat and demanding to be taken to Judge Roland Barnes's chambers. When a sergeant tried to step in, Nichols forced him to handcuff the others and set off an alarm, which Nichols tried to silence using the sergeant's radio. However, the alarm didn't stop the tragedy that followed. Nichols burst into the courtroom and, without hesitation, fatally injured Judge Barnes and court reporter Julie Ann Brando. As he fled, he encountered Sergeant Hoyt Teasley and took his life in cold blood as well.
Violence didn't stop inside the courthouse. Shortly after leaving the courthouse, Nichols shot and killed another deputy. He spent all day on the run, and that evening he went to a home in Buckhead and shot a federal agent before stealing his gun and pickup truck.
Nichols' escape was both bold and violent. He stole multiple vehicles, spreading fear across Atlanta. His face was everywhere, on TV, and even on America's Most Wanted. A $65,000 reward was offered for information leading to his capture, but Nichols managed to stay hidden. Atlanta was on high alert, with law enforcement all over the city as the manhunt grew more intense. People watched anxiously as hours passed with no sign of him. The next morning brought an unexpected breakthrough. Ashley Smith, a young woman from Duluth, Georgia, came face to face with Nichols when he forced his way into her apartment, holding her under threat. Despite the danger, Smith remained calm and courageous. Over the course of 7 hours, she talked with Nichols, sharing personal stories, including the loss of her husband. She even read to him from The Purpose-Driven Life and gave him methamphetamine. As the night went on, Smith's words seemed to affect Nichols. After sharing pancakes, Nichols, perhaps moved by her kindness or realizing his situation, let her leave to see her daughter. Smith used the chance to call 911, and soon, the authorities arrived at her apartment. Nichols later said that substances and alcohol influenced his actions that day.
I think I was delusional. I think that drugs and alcohol played a part in those delusions.
Nichols' capture, thanks in part to Ashley Smith's bravery, brought some closure to a city that had been living in fear. On December 13, 2003, he was sentenced to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole, avoiding several death sentences. On Mother's Day, May 9, 2021, a community celebration in St. Johns County, Florida, turned into a nightmare when the body of Tristan Bailey was found in a wooded area. The young cheerleader had been reported missing just hours before.
114 wounds, 49 defensive wounds, 35 wounds to the head and neck, 29 to the back and shoulder, and 6 fatal wounds.
The investigation quickly focused on a suspect, 14-year-old Aiden Fui, a fellow student at Patriot Oaks Academy. He lived close to Tristan Bailey and was last seen in chilling video footage walking with her on Saddlestone Drive, the area where her body was later found. As detectives worked through the events of that night, the evidence against Fui grew. A buck knife with a broken tip that matched a fragment found in Bailey's scalp was pulled from a nearby pond. In Fuchi's bedroom, police found blood-stained clothes and shoes, along with a notebook full of violent drawings, painting a disturbing picture of the accused. What started as a search for a missing girl had now become a murder investigation, with Fui at the center.
This particular crime was committed with the weapon of choice as a knife, which he nicknamed poker.
The legal proceedings began, and the case against Aiden Fui grew stronger. Initially charged with second-degree murder, the overwhelming evidence led to an upgrade to first-degree premeditated murder, reflecting the brutal and calculated nature of Tristan Bailey's death. Although Fui was a minor, he faced the court with his future in the hands of the justice system.
On behalf of Aiden Fui, we enter a change of plea at this time. Entering a guilty plea as charged.
In a surprising turn of events, just before jury selection in February 2023, Fui changed his plea to guilty. The knife, the bloodied clothes, and a chilling Snapchat selfie he took in the back of a patrol car painted a dark picture of the night Bailey lost her life. Throughout the process, Fui appeared calm, showing little emotion in his expressions or actions.
Mr. Fui, having entered a plea of guilty to the crime of first-degree murder, I adjudicate you guilty of the premeditated first-degree murder of Tristan Bailey. I sentence you to life in prison.
There appeared to be no signs of regret or remorse.
She has been threatening inmates and said he would that inmate. The inmate said Fui claimed, quote, "He's real because he a girl face to face and took her life."
In fact, there were rumors that he had boasted to other inmates about being real because he stabbed his victim up close instead of firing at them from a distance. This case takes place at Metro Juvenile Court in Nashville, where Toya Brown is about to be sentenced for the death of 43-year-old Johnny Allen, which occurred on the night of August 6, 2004. Brown had met Allen and agreed to engage in intimate acts with him for $150. The details of what happened inside Allen's home remain unclear.
At first he was just stroking me, but then it's like he just grabbed me like in between my legs, like he just grabbed it real hard. And he just gave me this look. It was like a very fierce look.
Brown was arrested and charged with homicide, aggravated robbery, weapon possession, and criminal impersonation. Even though she was only 16 at the time of the incident, she was tried as an adult. Brown never denied harming Allen, but argued that she acted in self-defense.
I thought he was reaching for a gun, so I'm like, oh shit, you know what I'm saying? That's what he's done. It's for my hair or something.
Yeah. And then what did you do?
She stated that Allen had repeatedly intimidated her, and when she believed he was reaching for a weapon, she injured him. Brown was later convicted of first-degree murder, felony murder, and aggravated robbery, receiving a life sentence in prison.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Toya Denise Brown, count 1, guilty, first-degree murder.
On January 7, 2019, her life sentence was reduced to 15 years, along with 10 years of supervised parole. Brown was finally released from prison on August 7, 2019. In the heart of Detroit, a story unfolded that captured the city with a blend of sorrow and anger. The case of Maxwell Brack, a name now linked to a terrible act of violence, reached its end in a courtroom where justice was sought for the untimely death of Kajavia Globe. As the gavel struck, the atmosphere was heavy with the significance of the sentence.
He didn't deserve it. He didn't understand what he had. He wanted to bring her down instead of uplift her. He was no good to her. Do you understand?
The city of Detroit, renowned for its resilience and spirit, was deeply shaken when news emerged of a crime that seemed to challenge the very nature of humanity. Kajavia Globe, a young woman with a bright smile that could light up the darkest rooms, became the focal point of a story that would leave a lasting impact on the community. Her disappearance raised widespread concern.
Did they put it in front of their house or someone else's house? Across the street at a vacant house.
Known for her dependability and strong family connections, Kajavia vanished without a trace, leaving behind a host of unanswered questions and a family filled with worry. The search for Kajavia began right away, with friends, family, and law enforcement scouring the streets of Detroit, eager for any sign of her.
When her body was found on Fielding.
And that's when you put 2 and 2 together?
Yes.
Days went by without any news or sightings, and the unsettling feeling that something was wrong began to grow. The investigation took a grim turn when Kajavia's lifeless body was discovered abandoned behind a vacant house, her face cruelly hidden by a Halloween mask. The city was horrified by the brutality of the act, prompting a community outcry for justice.
My baby, and she was so dumb. She loved this monster.
Maxwell Brack, Kajavia's ex-boyfriend, became the main suspect in this tragic case. Evidence against him started to accumulate as investigators pieced together the details of Kajavia's final days. Surveillance footage captured key moments that would serve as critical evidence in the case against Brack, showing a figure believed to be him withdrawing money from Kajavia's bank account using her car and ultimately disposing of her body.
The dumpster was the body of a female. She appeared to have on a red or orange type sweater. Around her neck was a red or orange, different color red or orange rope, and she appeared to be from the waist.
The story of the investigation was marked by careful police work and steadfast determination. Detectives combed through phone records, financial transactions, and witness statements, each piece of evidence bringing them closer to the truth. The community observed closely, holding its breath as the case against Brack became more concrete.
She was placed knees first into the bin.
A breakthrough occurred when forensic analysis confirmed that Brack's DNA was found on the mask located with Kajavia's body. This was a crucial piece of evidence that, combined with the multitude of other incriminating details, painted a clear picture of guilt. Brack's arrest soon followed, providing a somber sense of relief to those who had been anxiously following the case.
We as a jury find him guilty of the lesser offense of second-degree murder.
As the trial approached, the prosecution revealed the facts of the case to outline Kajavia's final moments and pursue the justice her family sought. The story of Maxwell Brack's crime illustrated a life tragically cut short, of families suffering, and the confrontation with the darkest sides of human nature. The judge recognized the family's pain and encouraged them to seek support.
You'll never be the same, but try to minimize the hurt by getting the counseling.
The sentencing of Brack marked the end of a sorrowful chapter for Kajavia Globe's family. For Detroit, a city accustomed to hardship, it was a moment that highlighted the community's determination to fight against violence. The 70-year sentence given to Brack provided closure for Kajavia's relatives and represented the relentless efforts of the justice system to ensure that, even in the face of darkness, light ultimately prevails. Marlon Joseph and Callidor Crowell, his housemate, got into a heated argument during which he pulled out a weapon and ended her life. He was reportedly angry about how her daughter, Kira Inglet, had treated his own daughter. Afterward, he chased Kira and fired at her as well. Now, after being found guilty by a jury, he awaits sentencing from Judge Cheryl Caravuzzo.
This process was a qualitative process and not a quantitative one. Understanding that process, this court then assigned an appropriate weight to each aggravating factor and determined they are singularly and in combination with each other more than sufficient to justify a sentence of death as to each count of first-degree murder in this case.
Judge Caravuzzo ruled that the aggravating factors outweighed the mitigating ones in Marlon Joseph's case. Although the defense claimed his mental health issues negated mens rea, or a criminal mindset, the judge didn't appear convinced. Since this is a case in Florida, Joseph could be facing the death penalty.
Having determined that the proven aggravating factors are sufficient, the court then undertook the weighting of the proven aggravating factors against the established mitigating circumstances. The court finds that as to each count of first-degree murder considered separately, the proven aggravating factors overwhelm the established mitigating circumstances.
As Marlon Joseph and his defense feared, the judge sided with the jury and ruled that he should receive the death penalty. Aside from the mental health issues raised by the defense, no other significant mitigating factors were presented that could have helped Joseph avoid this outcome.
This court wholly agrees with the jury's unanimous recommendation based on an independent review and assessment of the aggravating factors and mitigating circumstances presented. This court finds the aggravating factors heavily outweigh the mitigating circumstances and that death is the proper penalty.
The judge reinforced her decision with a final statement, justifying her choice to impose the death penalty on Marlon Joseph. She pointed out that the defense failed to prove that his actions weren't fully established. The facts were clear. Joseph injured a woman and her daughter without cause, and for that, he would face capital punishment. While it wasn't the outcome Joseph or his defense had hoped for, the court's ruling was final.
The court further finds that it would impose these sentences irrespective of whether one or more of the aggravator factors were found not to have been proven or sufficient. Marlon Joseph, you have not only forfeited your right to live among us, but under the laws of the state of Florida, you have forfeited your right to live at all.
Like all death row inmates, Marlon Joseph will spend the rest of his life in prison, never seeing the outside until his execution. Even if his death sentence is somehow commuted, it's highly unlikely he will ever be released. The most likely scenario would be a reduction of his sentence from death to life in prison.
Accordingly, it is hereby ordered and adjudged that, as to count one, for the first-degree murder of Callidor Crowell, Marlon Joseph shall be delivered into the custody of the Florida Department of Corrections at the Florida State Prison. You shall be confined there until a date certain selected by the governor of the state of Florida, and on that date you shall be executed in a method provided by Florida law.
Under Florida law, Marlon Joseph, like many other death row inmates, filed an appeal. However, his appeal was denied, and he now awaits execution. In the quiet town of Muskegon Heights, Michigan, a tragic crime disrupted the early morning peace on May 19, 2019. Vashon Flowers, 46, was accused of the brutal murder of his wife, Jamie Thomas Flowers, and faced charges of first-degree murder, domestic violence, assault with a dangerous weapon, and weapon possession. The trial revealed the deep pain left in the wake of the crime. During the proceedings, one of Jamie's sons, overwhelmed with grief and anger, confronted Vashon in an emotional outburst.
To Vashon, May 19, 2019 changed so many lives forever.
Vashon Flowers and Jamie Thomas Flowers' story started in a home where love once thrived, but later spiraled into something dark and unrecognizable. Jamie, 50, was known for her lively spirit and deep love for her family. Vashon, her husband, carried a past that loomed over their lives. Despite being married for just over a year, their relationship had already become strained, with tensions quietly building. What once appeared to be a hopeful union eventually unraveled into a tragic story, culminating in the devastating events that followed.
Did you observe some blood?
Yes, on her shirt. Bullets in her shirt and blood.
As the evening of May 18, 2019, wore on, tensions between Vashon and Jamie Flowers hit a breaking point. Their arguments grew louder, filling the night with conflict. Jamie's daughter, Paris Jones, was there to witness the escalating situation and recalled how Vashon's anger became violent, with him physically assaulting and Jamie. This disturbing incident seemed to foreshadow the tragedy to come. In a rage, Vashon slashed the tires of a car, a desperate attempt to keep Jamie from leaving the chaos that had taken over their lives. It was a haunting sign of the darkness that was about to unfold.
I heard, "You don't have to do this, Vashon. Please don't do this. You don't have to do this." And then I heard.
In the early hours of May 19th, tensions in the Flowers' home reached their peak. Paris Jones, hiding in a bedroom with her young son, was startled awake by the sound of the front door being forced open. She heard her mother's fearful voice pleading, "Don't do this, Vashon!" Moments later, firing shattered the silence. A frantic 911 call captured the terror. When the chaos subsided, Paris found her mother in the laundry room. This tragedy became the heart of a gripping trial that exposed the horror of domestic violence, leaving the Muskegon Heights community shaken by Jamie Thomas Flowers' death. Vashon Flowers, now convicted of murder, was sentenced to life without parole, destined to spend the rest of his life behind bars. The courtroom echoed with the weight of Jamie's final moments, a grim reminder of the cost of domestic violence. As Vashon sat with his public defender, a shocking incident took place. London Thomas, one of Jamie's 3 adult children, suddenly leapt from his seat, ran across the courtroom, and jumped the barrier to attack Vashon. This outburst highlighted the deep pain and anger left in the wake of the senseless violence. With a swift, flawless jump and spin, filled with rage, London charged at Vashon Flowers. Despite his speed, court officers quickly intervened, tackling and arresting him before the situation could escalate further. At the Bernalillo County District Court in New Mexico, 15-year-old Nehemiah Grigo was about to face his sentence for a terrible crime he committed on July 19, 2013. A mass incident in South Valley, New Mexico, resulted in the loss of 5 family members, shocking the nation. What made it even more disturbing was that the perpetrator was 15-year-old Nehemiah Grigo, the oldest son of the family.
Tonight we are learning more disturbing details of a mass murder in Albuquerque, South Valley. A 15-year-old Nehemiah Grigo is in jail after telling investigators he killed his parents and 3 younger siblings.
He began by attacking his mother, Sarah Grigo, around midnight with a .22 weapon.
Jael, the 5-year-old girl, was and awake at the time of her killing.
After that, he went downstairs and waited for his father, Greg Grigo, to return home from his shift at a homeless shelter. As soon as his father walked in at 5:05 a.m., Nehemiah fired at him multiple times with an AR-15 style semi-automatic weapon equipped with a scope.
It took approximately 5 hours for the dad, Greg Grigo, to come home, which would have been approximately 5 to 6 a.m. We believe that he was shot unexpectedly and was unaware of what had already occurred.
The young boy then sent a photo of his deceased mother to his girlfriend, loaded the family van with 2 weapons, and planned to harm more people before passing away in a confrontation with the police. Instead, he went to the family church and told the pastor that someone had fatally harmed his family. The pastor called 911, and when they arrived, they found the bodies. From there, Grigo began to change his story until he eventually confessed. The 15-year-old admitted he was feeling hopeless and had thoughts of harming others, which led to the tragedy. Nehemiah was charged with 2 counts of murder and 3 counts of child abuse, resulting in death.
I'm sorry for taking our parents and our kids. I wish I could take it back, but reality is that we can't.
He was ultimately sentenced to 3 life sentences to be served at the same time, along with an additional 7 years to be served after the life sentences. With credit for the 2,476 days, 6 years and 285 days, he had already served. He would need to serve 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. This is Giovanni Borus, an individual responsible for the harm of 2 young women. He's accused of ending his own daughter's life and also charged by the LAPD with the murder of 17-year-old Michelle Lozano, whose body was found on April 25th, 2011, dumped on a freeway, and recovered a month later. 8 months after that, Borus did the same thing to 22-year-old mother Brianna Guzman, who went missing the day after Christmas in 2011, and her body was found a month later. Both victims' bodies were left on the Los Angeles freeway. Borus worked at a pharmacy in the area where both victims lived, which is likely how he came across them. He made a crucial mistake by spitting on the ground after leaving one of the victims, and the police were able to collect DNA evidence, but it didn't match anyone in their database at the time. The police then decided to use the familial DNA process, which requires approval from the state attorney general's office. It turned out that Borges' father was in prison and already in the DNA database. While his DNA didn't match the crime scene, it was similar enough to lead detectives to start following his son, Giovanni Borus, around the clock. In court, when Guzman's mother and brother gave emotional speeches, Borus appeared visibly disturbed by everything.
DNA evidence led authorities to charge Giovanni Borus in 2017.
Almost close to a year later, I'm going to be doing the same for my own needs.
The judge had his own comments to make as well.
And I see a certain that runs the entire gamut of every kind of murder under every kind of circumstance. All those people I have sentenced, I've never found anyone as cold-blooded as you. There was no reason for these crimes.
Cold-blooded killer. Strong words. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life without parole. Judge Wayne Culver, a judge in Seminole County, gained attention for an outburst he had during what was clearly a bad day in court. Kevin Newton, along with his sister, entered the courtroom as part of the public gallery, but Judge Culver wasn't in the mood for a friendly reception.
Hold on. Sir, I'm doing something. Can you shut up and sit down?
Absolutely. I was trying to find a seat.
That's not shutting up. You want to be held in contempt and go to jail? I asked you a question.
No, sir.
Then shut up.
You could say the judge didn't care one bit. Kevin's sister also had a few things to say about the shocking incident.
Unacceptable. I was scared to react in any kind of way because I didn't want to go to jail. Blue tape on the benches. We didn't know where to sit because COVID. This judge just let his personal feelings take over.
The judge faced penalties for his angry outburst, though there were some who stood up in his defense.
I like him personally. Obviously he was frustrated and it was a bad day. The problem with it is that judges, like lawyers, you have to be good even on a bad day.
While it doesn't excuse his behavior, Judge Culver did eventually apologize to Newton and his sister, but only after the hearing had begun. It just goes to show that even the most respected individuals can sometimes let their bad days affect innocent and unsuspecting people. 2021, Rashad Hawkins made a dramatic escape from a courtroom in Meigs County, Tennessee, where he was facing jail time for unpaid child support. After being sentenced, Hawkins shocked everyone by running out of the courtroom, jumping over the rail, and leaping from the second floor to the ground floor, managing to flee before anyone could stop him. A manhunt was launched, and he remained on the run for 20 days. On May 30th, 2021, he was spotted in Harburg, Kentucky. Officer Blake Darlin from the Harburg Police Department responded to reports of a man trespassing in backyards and discovered Hawkins had an outstanding warrant in Tennessee. Hawkins tried to escape again, but Darlin caught him after a struggle. Hawkins was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including criminal trespassing, fleeing the police, assaulting an officer, possessing substance paraphernalia, menacing, and resisting arrest. He was held at the Boyle County Detention Center without bond. Trevon Biles, Thomas, the brother of Olympic gymnast Simone Biles, was acquitted of murder charges. He had been accused of fatally injuring 3 people at a New Year's Eve party in Cleveland in 2018. The first trial was cut short when jurors accidentally saw legal briefs discussing whether he acted in self-defense. After the second trial ended, the mother of one of the victims, visibly upset, rushed toward Biles Thomas, causing chaos in the courtroom. His defense lawyer, Joseph Patitucci, stated that Trevon Biles and Nefas Thomas felt vindicated by the acquittal and hinted at a promising future, possibly in the Army. Simone Biles, a 5-time Olympic medalist, has not publicly commented on the acquittal. Trevon Biles. Thomas was arrested in August 2019 and charged with murder, homicide, voluntary manslaughter, felonious assault, and perjury in connection with the 2018 incident that claimed the lives of 3 people at a house party. Following her brother's arrest in 2019, Simone Biles expressed that she was struggling to process the situation and asked for privacy for her family. This is John Bunn. He spent 27 years wrongfully convicted of murder.
I'm an innocent man, Your Honor, and I have always been an innocent man.
While living in Brooklyn, New York, John Bunn was just 14 years old when he was arrested by NYPD detective Louis Scarcella. Bunn went on to spend 16 years in prison, followed by 11 years on parole, all the while fighting to prove his innocence. His conviction was ultimately overturned, citing Detective Scarcella's misconduct and the fact that there was no probable cause for Bunn's arrest in the first place.
Y'all know that. Y'all convicted and had a warm man in prison.
After 27 years of fighting to clear his name, John Bunn was finally exonerated.
I want to say thank you, Your Honor, because in 27 years, I've been fighting for my life.
Before leaving the courtroom, John Bunn shared a moment with the judge. Later, he filed a lawsuit against the city of New York and Detective Scarcella. This case is a wild one. Richard Jones spent 17 years in prison for a robbery he didn't commit, despite every eyewitness identifying him as the suspect. So, how could Jones be innocent if everyone saw him do it? Well, there's more to this story than meets the eye. Nearly 20 years ago, Jones was charged with aggravated robbery in Kansas City, Kansas, for allegedly trying to steal a purse in a parking lot. He had an alibi and there was no physical evidence tying him to the crime. The victim described the suspect as having a thin to medium build, tan skin, and dark hair pulled back. Out of a lineup of 6 mugshots, the victim picked Jones. That eyewitness testimony sent him to prison. No DNA, no physical evidence, and a strong alibi were all overlooked because of the victim's selection. He was described as a perfect match, but here's the twist. What if I told you there were actually 2 different people? Believe it.
We are back with a case of mistaken identity that forced a man to spend 17 years behind bars.
And the discovery casting doubt on his guilty verdict.
I believe it was a striking resemblance. It just blew me away. Couldn't let someone else's mistake make me waver in my faith and never make me shy away from what was real and what the truth was, and that was I was innocent, and I knew it.
After serving 15 years, Richard Jones reached out to the Midwest Innocence Project. With their help, he discovered the man who looked just like him. And when people saw the resemblance, minds were blown.
During that visit, Mr. Jones actually said to the students, "I keep getting mistaken for this guy named Ricky Amos."
The victim was brought back in to identify the suspect, but this time, Richard Jones and his look-alike, Amos, stood side by side.
Recognized that an injustice had been done. Everyone did. The victim did. The original prosecutor did. And came to testify that Richard Jones didn't commit this crime.
Crazy, right? What are the odds of finding your real-life doppelganger? Not only does he look exactly like you, but he also shares the same legal name. And to top it off, he ends up in the same prison as you. Unbelievable! Let's dive into the shocking story of Michelle Feldman and Thomas Williamson, a couple whose disturbing crimes stunned the nation. Feldman and Williamson, who seemed like an ordinary couple, were hiding a dark secret. Behind the scenes, they ran a human trafficking operation that left their community in disbelief.
Couple from Reynoldsburg headed to prison out of a human trafficking case. The judge handed Michelle Feldman a 7-year prison sentence today after she pled guilty to attempted human trafficking, extortion, and theft. Her fiancé, Thomas Williamson, was sentenced to 15 years.
Michelle Feldman, 31, and Thomas Williamson, 34, seemed like an average couple living in Reynoldsburg, but they were far from ordinary. They trapped innocent victims, forcing them into terrible situations. Reynoldsburg, a quiet town in Franklin County, Ohio, became the setting for their cruel scheme. Using lies and manipulation, they took advantage of vulnerable people, pretending Williamson was a military man looking for a relationship. He created fake online profiles, and the victims were told to stay at Williamson's home while waiting for this military man to return. What these women didn't know was they were walking into a nightmare. Once inside the couple's home on White Birch Court, the victims were subjected to horrific abuse. They were forced into slave labor, made to give up their money, and endured both physical and emotional abuse at the hands of Feldman and Williamson. The extent of their suffering was unimaginable, with scars on their bodies and crushed spirits from the cruelty inflicted upon them. On March 27, 2015, the truth began to come out when one of the victims was caught shoplifting and courageously gave authorities information about the horrors happening in the couple's home. Feldman and Williamson were arrested and charged with human trafficking, assault, battery, extortion, grand theft, and more. As the trial unfolded, the full extent of their crimes became clear. Feldman pleaded guilty to attempted trafficking, extortion, and grand theft. The prosecution presented evidence of abuse, forced labor, and financial exploitation. The victims bravely testified about their terrible experiences, painting a chilling picture of the couple's cruelty. Feldman's defense attorney, Mark C. Collins, argued that she had also been abused by Williamson, but acknowledged that her past didn't excuse her actions. Judge Pat Sheeran carefully considered the evidence and the suffering caused by Feldman and Williamson. Feldman eventually agreed to testify against Williamson in exchange for a plea deal, which prosecutor Jennifer Rouse said was key to securing his guilty plea. Williamson pleaded guilty to 1 count of trafficking in persons, making it the county's first human trafficking conviction. Feldman was sentenced to 7 years in prison for her role in the crimes. She expressed remorse, apologizing for the harm she caused, and hoping to find redemption. Williamson, who pleaded guilty to human trafficking, received a 15-year sentence. This marked a significant moment, as it was the county's first human trafficking conviction. This is Judge Charles Stengel, a former circuit judge for the 14th Judicial Circuit Court of Illinois in Rock Island County. Before retiring, he handled a case where he firmly put an attorney in his place. The incident happened during the Kristen Holtzman trial. Holtzman had been running a scam, raising money for brain cancer that she didn't actually have. Her defense attorney, Jack Schwartz, was trying to discredit a witness by bringing up past legal issues that the judge had already dismissed. Judge Stengel wasn't about to allow it.
Looks like it was dismissed, however, she was forced to pay restitution.
Are you kidding me that it was dismissed and you're bringing up something that was dismissed? And you know that that cannot be impeached? You know what, Mr. Schwartz, you know the rules of Montgomery or the Illinois Supreme Court rules and the rules of evidence regarding impeachment, do you not?
Yes, I do, Judge.
And how long have you been practicing law to know those rules?
A long time, Judge.
Judge Stengel appeared quite frustrated with Mr. Schwartz, and the situation only escalated as the judge continued to reprimand him even more forcefully.
I gave you time for a recess for you to prepare for this question, to cross-examine this witness. You said that you were ready. And you're telling me you weren't ready?
I'm curious about what the attorney has to say to defend himself.
No, I thought I was ready.
That's quite a defense. Maybe if he had been better prepared, this situation could have been avoided.
Well, you know, you made a very serious mistake here, Mr. Schwartz, and there are going to be sanctions because you know, and I don't believe that you're saying that you didn't know it wasn't dismissed. You had ample opportunity to know who this witness was. And there are going to be sanctions, and I haven't quite decided what those sanctions are going to be, but I'm going to tell the jury that that question was wholly improper.
I have a feeling this attorney won't be too upset about Judge Stengel being retired, and he's probably learned his lesson about trying to use dismissed evidence in court again. This is Gerald Callahan, a well-known businessman from Nixa, but more importantly, an individual responsible for serious crimes. On June 17, 1985, 20-year-old Jackie Johns, who worked as a waitress at the Nixa Sale Barn Cafe, was last seen alive. Her car was found abandoned on the highway, with a horrifying amount of blood and clothes inside. 4 days later, her body was discovered in a nearby lake. One of the witnesses was Carnahan's own brother, who later admitted that Gerald had told him not to speak to the police. Despite this, the lack of physical evidence connecting Gerald to the incident led to the charges being dropped. 8 years later, Gerald attempted to abduct another girl off the street, which failed and landed him in prison, adding his DNA to the database. Though his previous case had gone cold, investigators never gave up on Gerald. By 2007, with more advanced DNA testing, they were able to match Gerald to the 22-year-old semen sample from Jackie John's case.
Outgoing Greene County Prosecutor Daryl Moore and local defense attorney Dee Wampler have spent the last 3 years poring over the evidence.
Monday morning while we go at it.
The jury sentenced Gerald Callahan to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. A medical professional from Southern California was found responsible for the deaths of 3 of her patients, who all reportedly overdosed on substances.
Shall receive the sentencing term as prescribed under the law as dictated under Penal Code Section 190, subsection A, that is, a term of 15 years to life for each count to run consecutively to one another. Thus, a term of 30 years to life for counts 1 and 4.
Dr. Lisa showed no emotion while the judge was delivering the sentence. Is this a pattern? Could it be a lack of remorse or something else?
In prison if convicted on all 24 counts. Again, the preliminary hearing gets underway later on this morning at the criminal courthouse.
The lead prosecutor, a deputy district attorney from LA County, stated that Sang is the first doctor in U.S. history to be convicted of murder for recklessly prescribing substances. Given the opioid crisis numbers, this seems overdue. However, the judge, while delivering the tough sentence, expressed his disbelief that Sang kept writing dangerous prescriptions even after learning her patients were dying.
October 30th, 2015, a jury convicted the defendant, Lisa Sang, of 3 counts of second-degree murder and 19 counts of unlawfully prescribing a controlled substance in violation of Health and Safety Code Section 11-153.
12 of Sang's patients died, but she was only charged with 3 murders, as the other deaths involved different factors. Throughout the trial, she showed no remorse, staying emotionless the entire time. Now, she's facing a life behind 4 cold walls. Let's go to the United States District Court, where a former FBI agent, once sworn to protect, is now caught in a web of lies, his reputation ruined by his acts. It all started in 1987 when FBI agent Mark Pam was involved in an investigation to catch Carl Edward Cat Eyes Lockhart, an ex-convict and bank robber. The local sheriff's deputy brought Susan Smith, an FBI informant, to work with Pam because she was once married to Kenneth Smith, a close friend of Lockhart. The deputy suggested Susan could help as an informant, giving her the chance to earn extra money. Susan agreed and worked secretly with the FBI, providing Pam with information that led to Lockhart's capture and a 57-year sentence. For her efforts, Susan was paid $5,000, but the story didn't end there. Soon after, Susan's relationship with Pam shifted from business to something personal, turning into an affair. Pam, who was married and building a career, knew this affair could ruin his family and career. He tried to end it by requesting a transfer to Florida, hoping the distance would help. However, fate had other plans. While back in Kentucky for work, Susan revealed she was pregnant and claimed the child was his. Pam, faced with the consequences, suggested that he and his wife adopt the baby. Susan refused. Feeling trapped, Pam drove Susan to a secluded area to talk, but things got out of hand. In a panic, he strangled Susan, who was still pregnant at the time. He left her body on an old coal mining road and fled back to his family in Florida. 3 days later, Susan was reported missing by her sister, and suspicion quickly fell on Pam. The FBI, now investigating one of their own, stepped in. Putum failed a lie detector test, which suggested he was hiding the truth. Eventually, he confessed, admitting to strangling Susan during a fight. He pled guilty to first-degree manslaughter, avoiding the public scandal of his affair. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. In April 2021, Judge Sandra J. Feuerstein of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York was involved in a hit-and-run accident in Boca Raton, Florida. Anastasia Snape, who claimed to be Harry Potter, was driving the car that struck and fatally harmed Feuerstein, adding a surreal twist to an already disturbing case. Get ready as we explore the chilling details of this tragic incident. Nastasia Andron Snape, a 23-year-old woman with a last name similar to a certain fictional character from the Harry Potter series, was about to become the focus of a real-life story filled with tragedy and disbelief. Before that day in April 2021, Snape was relatively unknown, with no signs that she would soon find herself in the national spotlight for such a horrific reason. On that Friday, her actions would trigger a chain of events leading to Judge Sandra Feuerstein's untimely death and leaving a boy, Anthony Chekhov, seriously injured.
23-year-old Natasha Snape is in jail. She's facing charges of leaving an accident involving and a scene of a crash with injury.
As the day began, Snape was driving her car through the streets of Boca Raton. Witnesses later told the police that her driving was far from normal. She swerved around, stopped traffic, as if the rules of the road were just suggestions.
On Friday, police arrested Snape after they say she drove onto a Boca Raton sidewalk, hit two pedestrians, one of them 75-year-old Sandra Feuerstein, a federal judge based out of New York. A 6-year-old boy was also seriously hurt.
Her car veered off the road and onto the sidewalk, where Judge Feuerstein was walking. The 75-year-old federal judge was hit with such force that she did not survive her injuries. But Snape's reckless actions didn't stop there. She returned to the road and struck young Anthony in a crosswalk. The beloved judge lay lifeless, and Anthony was left in critical condition. Despite this, Snape showed no signs of stopping or remorse as she fled the scene, driving into neighboring Delray Beach, where her car eventually crashed. When Delray Beach police arrived at the scene of the second crash, they found Snape in a condition that was hard to explain.
Officers found Snape unconscious after she crashed at another location. They say when she woke up, she began acting strangely, including staring into space. Investigators say inside the ambulance, she fought with medical personnel, claiming she was Harry Potter.
She appeared to be convulsing, but when she got out of her vehicle, her demeanor changed to one of eerie calmness. She stared blankly into space, unresponsive to the officers trying to talk to her, as if she had retreated into her own world, ignoring the seriousness of her actions. As she was taken to the hospital, Snape's behavior became even more erratic. She fought with the medics, screaming and claiming to be Harry Potter. To regain control of the situation, the medics had to sedate her. The arresting officers reported finding substances in her possession, including containers labeled THC, cannabis, and Epsom salts, which can lead to erratic behavior. Snape was charged with vehicular homicide for Judge Feuerstein's death, a serious charge. In Florida, vehicular homicide is a second-degree felony that could result in up to 15 years in prison, 50 years of probation, and a $10,000 fine. Additionally, the charge of leaving the scene of an accident involving death could add another 30 years to her sentence, while leaving the scene involving injury could lead to a maximum of 5 years. In total, Snape faced the possibility of decades in prison. During Joseph Zella's sentencing hearing, he surprised everyone by elbowing his lawyer. In a similar vein, Titus Colbert couldn't help but interrupt the court during his own hearing. In San Diego, California, Colbert appeared before the court to face the consequences of his actions. He was charged with attempted murder of police officers and possession of a weapon by a convicted felon. These charges arose from a terrifying incident that started as an ordinary day in Bankers Hill. Colbert's ex-girlfriend called the police, fearing for her safety, which led to a lengthy standoff. When officers arrived, Colbert refused to cooperate and opened fire with 2 rifles and a revolver. The standoff lasted 5 hours, creating chaos in the neighborhood and disrupting daily life, even halting flights at Lindbergh Field. Yet, during Colbert's court appearance, he continued to interrupt the proceedings.
May 1st, 1776. May 1st, 1776. I stand for a new world order.
At one point during the court proceedings, Colbert was seen making gang signs with his hands. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for assaulting a peace officer with a weapon. Next, we have the scandalous case of Charles F. McGonagal, a high-ranking FBI agent who was exposed as corrupt because he sold his integrity. In the United States District Court in Columbia, McGonagal faced the reality of a serious sentence. Join us in the courtroom as we explore a world of espionage, secret deals, and the reaction of a corrupt FBI agent facing the consequences of his actions. Charles F. McGonagal's story starts not with scandal, but with a strong reputation built over years of dedicated work. He joined the FBI as a special agent in 1996 and eventually became the special agent in charge of the Counterintelligence Division for the New York field office. However, beneath this facade of integrity, a troubling reality was unfolding, one that would surprise those who thought they knew him. As McGonagal rose through the ranks, the pressures and temptations of power began to tarnish his once spotless record. According to court documents, he kept his secret relationship with a former foreign security officer hidden while he was in charge of the FBI's New York office before retiring in September 2018. This security officer had business connections with foreign countries and governments. Additionally, McGonagal failed to inform the FBI that he received at least $225,000 in cash from this individual, traveled abroad with him, and met with foreign nationals to help their private business interests. He was arrested for his connections to a Russian oligarch on January 21st, 2023, at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. The charges against McGonagal were serious. He was indicted by the U.S. Attorney's offices for the District of Columbia and the Southern District of New York on multiple counts, including conspiring to break the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and committing money laundering.
New York, McGonagal is charged with hiding $225,000 he received from a former Albanian intelligence officer while McGonagal was still inside the FBI. And in Washington, McGonagal is charged with money laundering and violating Russian sanctions.
McGonagal chose to plead guilty on September 22, 2023. He admitted to one count of hiding material information.
Former FBI spy hunter now faces up to 5 years in jail after he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to violate U.S. sanctions on Tuesday.
The court sentenced him to 28 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. This sentence would be served consecutively with a separate 50-month prison term for conspiring to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and for money laundering. The court also imposed a $40,000 fine. While handing down the sentence, the judge remarked that McGonagal's actions significantly interfered with the administration of justice. The sentence reflected not only the seriousness of his crimes, but also the betrayal of his oath as an FBI agent. It was a fall from grace that echoed throughout the FBI. Next, we go to Memphis, Tennessee, where 19-year-old Shelby Isaac is in front of the judge for a verdict hearing. She is accused of first-degree murder for the deaths of Eddie Tate and his girlfriend, Edwina Thomas, who was 8 weeks pregnant at the time. The events took place nearly 2 years before the trial and started with what seemed like a simple transaction, a purchase of hair extensions worth $250. However, this was no ordinary deal. The prosecution described it as a transaction that went wrong, claiming that Isaac, unhappy with her purchase, set up a second meeting with Tate under the pretense of resolving the issue. It was during this meeting that Shelby allegedly harmed Eddie and his pregnant girlfriend.
At the time, they center arm pointed at these people, pointed in the direction of Edwina Thomas. And we know that she decided to pull the trigger at least 6 times.
The defense, however, disputed this narrative by highlighting the clear lack of physical evidence connecting Isaac to the crime.
Follow the credible and unbiased evidence in this case. It does not lead you to Shelby Isaac.
The jury, responsible for deciding Isaac's fate, carefully considered the evidence presented. After thorough examination, they reached a verdict that would determine the young woman's future. Judge James Lamey, who oversaw the case, announced the verdict.
The jury finds the defendant guilty of reckless homicide as included in count 3.
Upon hearing the verdict, Isaac lost her composure, resulting in a dramatic outburst in court. The 19-year-old fell to the floor and stayed there as deputies attempted to revive her. Shelby Isaac was sentenced to 30 years in prison, with no chance of release until 2040. Let's head to Hampton Superior Court in Springfield, where Lee-Manuel Rios is about to be sentenced for the murder of Kenneth Lopez. In March 2015, 18-year-old Kenneth Lopez and Lee Rios took a cab to a location at Dwight and Calhoun Streets in Massachusetts North End. However, on March 25th, Lopez's body was found around noon with multiple weapon-inflicted wounds. It didn't take long for the incident to be connected to Lee Rios, a dangerous member of the Latin Kings involved in illicit substance dealing and violence in the city.
So Lee Rios and Kenneth Lopez were both Latin Kings. Now, Lee Rios felt disrespected by Kenneth Lopez. So Lee Rios starts going around and telling everybody he's going to kill Kenneth Lopez.
According to reports, Lopez, who was also part of the gang, had a falling out with Rios, though the reason for it wasn't clear. However, Rios reached out to Lopez, claiming he only wanted to resolve their issues. He even offered to help Lopez with a problem involving someone else. The two decided to take a cab together to Dwight and Calhoun Streets, where Rios brutally ended the life of teenager. Lopez was struck 5 times, with 4 of the impacts hitting him twice in the head.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence that you will see and hear in this case will show you that Lee Rios backed up his words and did what he said he was going to do when he killed Kenneth Lopez in the early morning hours of March 24th, 2015.
After incident, Lopez Rios allegedly took the deceased's weapon with him. Testimony from other Latin Kings members who knew about the incident indicated that Rios was excited about ending Lopez's life and even bragged about it afterward.
Count 1, murder in the first degree. You will, on your oaths, say that the defendant is guilty on a theory of deliberate premeditation and a theory of extreme atrocity.
Eventually, Rios was convicted of the charges against him and sentenced to life in prison without the chance for parole, along with an extra 14 to 15 years for the weapon charges. Luis Reyes pleaded guilty to rape and robbery. The crime happened when teenagers got into an elderly woman's home through their friend Sean. Sean, 16, had gained the woman's trust by helping her with chores, but was actually stealing from her. Sean wasn't there the night of the attack. Carlos Fernandez, 14, and Luis Reyes, 15, went to the woman's apartment at night with their 20-year-old friend. They snuck in through the back door and started searching for pills and money. They planned to steal and leave, but the woman woke up and caught them. The woman was assaulted with a sharp object while she screamed in pain. Reyes and Fernandez claimed they weren't involved and didn't see it happen. In court, their behavior was different from when they were arrested. They joked about being juveniles and not getting severe punishment. The officer who arrested them recorded this. The prosecutor asked for life sentences, but a Supreme Court ruling made this impossible. During the hearings, the boys mostly looked at the floor. Reyes was sentenced to 30 years in prison and 10 years of probation. After hearing this, Reyes got angry and tried to resist the bailiffs, shouting loudly as they took him away. Randall Moore was convicted of harming and taking the life of his estranged wife, Therizanne Linmore, on November 11, 2009. He was also found guilty of attempting to take the life of police officer Todd Rowland, who had responded to cries for help from their former apartment. Moore abducted Therizanne from a Target parking lot, brought her to his apartment, assaulted her, and then ended her life. Just a month before the incident, Therizanne had left Moore and obtained a no-contact order against him. Moore had a violent history, with several women in Des Moines accusing him of harassment, stalking, and making violent threats. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms for the murder, and an additional 25 years for harming Officer Rowland. During sentencing, Moore showed no remorse for his act to Therizanne, stating he had no regret for her demise and blaming the situation on not being able to see his child. He also added that her family would never see the child again as a result.
And I'll tell you point blank, I have not 1 ounce of remorse for Therizanne. It could have all been prevented. All you had to do is let me see my kid. Now you're never going to see her again.
During Sheila Lynch's victim impact statement, Randall Moore insulted her, shouting that Therizanne hated her, calling her a loser, and urging her to read her late daughter's journals for proof.
My daughter, Therizanne Marie Lynch, was evil, hateful, and despicable. You are and rotting and repulsive to me.
Read the journal she wrote. She hated you. She hated you. You're a loser.
Before sentencing, Randall Moore spoke for nearly 11 minutes. He apologized to Officer Todd Rowland for harming him and admitted that he could have taken Roland's life when he was on the ground behind the police car. Moore explained that he didn't harm Roland multiple times because the officer hadn't drawn his weapon, stating that if Roland had, he would have been facing another murder charge. In a controversial statement, Moore expressed hope that more people would face similar consequences if they prevented their spouse from seeing their children. In American crime history, few stories are as upsetting as that of Carol Cole, a man who went from being a war veteran to a ruthless serial killer. His downfall in society led to violent crimes against women, and eventually his execution. This story examines Cole's troubled past, from Sioux City, Iowa, to his reputation as a notorious killer, showing the dark path that brought him there.
Why not fight for your life?
I just don't care.
Carol Cole was born on May 9, 1938, in the small town of Sioux City, Iowa. He entered a world that was far from ideal. His early life was marked by a turbulent family situation that would greatly impact his future. Cole was the second son of Laverne and Vester Cole, a couple whose troubled marriage created a dysfunctional environment. His father, Laverne, was a World War II veteran who returned home to find his family filled with infidelity and emotional chaos. Vester Cole's mother engaged in many affairs while her husband was away at war, and in a cruel twist, she often took young Carol with her to these secret meetings, threatening him with violence if he ever told anyone about her actions.
To me, just also because I not suffered, but I thought about it and condemned myself for many years.
The psychological torment from his mother was worsened by her choice to dress Cole in girls' clothing, which led to relentless bullying and ridicule from his peers. They mocked him for his feminine name, further isolating him and fueling a growing hatred that would eventually become deadly. Cole's first encounter with violence came at just 8 years old, when he drowned a classmate named Dwayne in a lake in Richmond, California. This act of aggression was initially labeled a tragic accident, a decision that allowed Cole's violent impulses to go unchecked for many years. In the following years, Cole's violent tendencies escalated. In 1960, he attacked 2 couples parked in cars at a lover's lane, reflecting his disturbing violent fantasies. He even contacted the police in Richmond, California, confessing his dark thoughts about strangling women, but his cry for help went ignored. As Cole's mental health deteriorated, he was admitted to mental hospitals multiple times over the next 3 years. At Stockton State Hospital, Dr. Weiss noted Cole's fear of women and his belief that he needed to end the life of a woman before he could have intercourse with her. Despite this alarming revelation and a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder, Cole was released in April 1963, a decision that would have serious consequences.
Are you sorry?
For the victim?
Yes.
Yes.
In the years that followed, Cole moved around aimlessly, living a life filled with alcohol, failed relationships, and growing violence. He married an alcoholic stripper named Billy Whiter in Dallas, Texas, but the marriage did nothing to calm his inner turmoil. In a fit of rage and jealousy, Cole set a motel on fire, believing Whiter was being unfaithful. This act of arson landed him in prison, but even this punishment didn't change his behavior. After his release, he tried to strangle a girl in Missouri, which led to a 5-year prison sentence, a sentence that Cole himself felt was too lenient.
Anyone in particular?
Especially the one that was the 11-year-old girl way back in 1967. And even doing that 5-year sentence, that wasn't enough.
It was in Nevada, after his release, that Cole's violent urges fully emerged. His method was straightforward and brutal. He targeted vulnerable women, often those he met in bars or who were seeking connection. He used strangulation as his method of harm, a deeply personal and hands-on approach that allowed him to see the life leave his victim's eyes. This method, which he first used as a child, was now perfected in his adult life. The first known victim of Cole's adult crimes was Essie Louise Buck, whom he met in a San Diego tavern on May 7, 1971. After earning her trust, Cole strangled her to death in his car. He then drove around with her body hidden in the trunk before disposing of it in a location that would be hard to find. Just 2 weeks later, he ended the life of another unidentified woman and buried her in a wooded area.
I can just imagine what her life might have been like.
Cole's wandering lifestyle continued as he left San Diego behind, leaving a trail of death in his wake. In 1979, he met Marie Cushman in a bar in Las Vegas. They spent the night at a motel, which ended with Cole strangling Cushman, adding another victim to his growing list. Cole's freedom came to an end in November 1980 in Dallas, Texas. After fatally strangling 3 more women, he became a suspect in the second incident and was found at the scene of the third. Initially, police believed the third victim had died of natural causes, and they nearly ruled Cole out as a suspect. However, in a moment of honesty, or perhaps a need for recognition of his dark actions, Cole confessed to his acts. He claimed to have taken the lives of at least 14 women over the past 9 years, though he acknowledged there could be more that he couldn't remember, as he was often intoxicated when committing the crimes.
Do you deserve to?
I can't answer that question.
No, it's the ultimate question. It is the question.
For what I did, yes, I think I deserve to die.
Cole's confession resulted in his arrest and subsequent trial. On April 9, 1981, he was convicted of 3 murders in Texas. The gravity of his crimes finally caught up with him, and he was sentenced to life in prison. However, the story was far from finished. Cole's past would soon resurface in Nevada, where more charges awaited him, and the threat of the death penalty loomed large.
When you think about this execution, are you afraid that there might be some pain involved? After all, we don't really know. This is the first time that the state has carried out this type of execution.
If I said if I wasn't concerned about that, I'd be lying.
3 years later, after the death of his mother, Cole's attitude reportedly shifted. He agreed to face additional murder charges in Nevada, even though this could result in the death penalty. In February 1984, Cole was extradited to Nevada, where he was tried and convicted for the strangulation deaths of 2 women in 1977 and 1979. In October 1984, he was sentenced to death in Nevada. Upon receiving his sentence, he simply said, "Thanks." The case of former 14th District Judge Angus McGinty is similar. Facing charges for accepting bribes in exchange for favorable rulings, McGinty was about to face his consequences at the Bezar County Courthouse. From January to September 2013, according to court documents and prosecutor Susan Reed, Judge McGinty solicited and accepted bribes from attorney Alberto Acevedo. These bribes included cash, car repairs, assistance in selling McGinty's vehicle, and registering a vehicle he purchased. In return, McGinty gave Acevedo and his clients favorable rulings, such as lighter sentences and less restrictive release conditions. In one instance, McGinty reduced a repeat DWI offender's sentence from prison to probation after Acevedo paid a mechanic, who was secretly cooperating with the FBI, to work on the judge's cars. The indictment revealed that McGinty received various gifts and payments in return for these favors. On March 17, 2014, Acevedo pled guilty to bribery involving a program receiving federal funds and testified against McGinty, despite the judge initially denying the allegations.
I do my job professionally and without malice towards anyone.
Initially charged with conspiracy to commit federal programs bribery, extortion under color of official right, and honest services wire fraud, McGinty's indictment was later amended to include a charge of extortion under color of official right. He resigned from the bench and ultimately pled guilty on April 13, 2015, to an honest services wire fraud charge. McGinty admitted to depriving the state of Texas and the citizens of Bexar County of his honest services by soliciting and accepting bribes meant to influence his judicial decisions. The former Texas State District Court judge was sentenced to 2 years in prison. This is Sheriff Todd Pate, who was arrested not once, but twice for driving under the influence, and this time, injuring another driver. On March 8, 2019, Pate, then 51 years old, was arrested for his second DUI after causing a crash that left another driver injured. Investigators discovered that Pate had been stopped and released by an officer shortly before his arrest. The case was assigned to Special Judge Janet Crocker and Special Prosecutor Blake Chambers, and Pate faced 9 charges, including first-degree assault, DUI, 4 counts of wanton endangerment, first and third-degree criminal mischief, and leaving the scene of an accident. The citizens of Breen Ridge County, Kentucky, launched a petition demanding Pate's immediate resignation or removal from office without further compensation, citing his repeated offenses. In their statement, they said, "Sheriff Pate has repeatedly broken the law by driving under the influence, endangering lives, and tampering with evidence. His actions have breached public trust, and he has neglected his responsibilities as a law enforcement officer. He has shown poor judgment and lack of self-discipline, making him unfit to hold others accountable. Pate has violated his oath of office and no longer reflects the values of our community or has the trust of the people he serves. While we wish him well in his future, we believe his immediate removal is necessary for the safety and well-being of our community." Before the hearing, Pate indicated his willingness to accept a plea deal that included 75 days of imprisonment with credit for time served. But here's where it gets interesting.
Is that your phone, Mr. Pate?
Yes, it is.
You need to put it away.
Okay. I was just had a...
You need to put it away.
Okay. Can I make somewhat of a statement?
That is a yes or no.
Todd, once a sheriff who carried himself with ego and authority, is about to experience a harsh reality check as he sees how the world looks from the other side.
March 8th, when I drank and drove, thank God I didn't kill anybody. But I want this court to know, I want the people to know, and I want the public to know that Todd Pate holds himself responsible for everything that he did. But it's hard for me to lay down and plead to felony charges that don't apply.
So I think we are back, Mr. Pate, and probably should have stayed in the place where we started. Again, I wanted to give you an opportunity to have further discussions with your attorney. But I think
I'm sorry, ma'am, for doing
you
this.
don't have.
I'm sorry for.
What I need to, I think we're back to where we were before. Is it your intention today to enter this guilty plea? And I think we're at a yes or no place at that point.
Can I say one more thing? I think everybody in this room wants this over with. If I could address Blake, I hope you learn from this case I'm not mad at you. I'm not in any way upset with you.
Mr. Pate,
not that it
we
matters.
have reached that point now.
Okay.
This is either a yes or no. Are you going to enter your plea or not?
I guess everybody thinks it's funny.
Certainly not the people who I think are here with you today, Mr.
No, they don't. I've broken everybody's heart. But it's hard for me when I see Mr. Chambers sitting over there smiling. Let me just plea and get it over with for everybody. Plead to something that I absolutely do not feel good about, but I don't want you to try to send me to the penitentiary for years and years. If you can sleep with it, I can sleep with it.
Okay.
And this is probably
I think
unusual,
we're done.
but
At
let's
this
do
point
it.
in time, I think we're done. And so let me tell you where I think we are today, is that we have executed plea document. We're done at this point in time, other than setting this for further hearing as to whether or not the Commonwealth can enforce this plea, whether or not the Commonwealth is going to choose to withdraw its plea offer, whether or not the Commonwealth can withdraw its plea, and then whether or not Mr. Pate can withdraw his plea. But at this point, we've got a fully executed plea document that provided in pertinent part that he was to serve 75 days in jail, and he's going into jail today.
In the end, Todd served just 29 days in jail and paid an $800 fine. Melissa Carone, an IT contractor hired by a voting machine company, found herself in the spotlight following the 2020 U.S. elections, which were filled with allegations of irregularities and fraud. Her court hearing took an unexpectedly humorous turn.
I know what I saw, and I signed something saying that if I'm wrong, I can go to prison.
A self-proclaimed whistleblower, whose claims of election misconduct were previously dismissed by a judge, gained significant attention on social media with her confrontational appearance before Michigan lawmakers. Melissa Carone, a Republican, made numerous fraud allegations during a hearing that was part of Donald Trump's efforts to overturn certified votes. Despite Trump's lawsuits failing in court, he and his allies organized high-profile hearings for the media and local lawmakers. Carone, a former contract IT worker for Dominion Voting Systems, captured headlines with her dramatic style, Midwestern accent, and casual demeanor. In fact, even attorney Rudy Giuliani tried to calm her down. Her testimony quickly went viral, with footage of her speaking before the Michigan House Oversight Committee garnering tens of millions of views.
Said, Melissa, I don't want to hear that we have a problem. He said, we are here to assist with IT. We are not here to run their election. That is exactly what he said to me. These Democrats took every avenue possible to commit fraud in this election.
Corrin claimed to have seen numerous fraudulent activities at a vote counting center in Detroit. However, a judge had previously deemed affidavits from other individuals at the center, which contradicted Corrin's statements, to be more credible, ruling in November that her allegations were simply not credible. Despite this, the Trump campaign continued to present her as a witness, and she testified before the Michigan House of Representatives Oversight Panel, insisting that other campaign witnesses could support her claims and alleging that Democrats had ruined her life for speaking out. Among her many accusations, Corrin stated that Michigan ballots were counted multiple times, that votes were cast by deceased individuals and undocumented immigrants, and that the poll books used to track voter information were highly inaccurate. However, a Republican lawmaker countered her claims, stating that they did not match his observations. A man from Greeley, charged with murdering 2 people in 2020, including a well-known trumpet player in the Greeley area who was a regular in the Denver band The Movers and Shakers, was implicated in the case. According to the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, the body of Stanley Scott Sessions was found on February 10, 2020 in Bellevue.
Scotty in the brass section brought a smile to the faces of band members and countless audiences. He brought a whole new dimension to our stage and our performances. He would take an ordinary song and light it up. It became extraordinary when Scotty played it. There was a profound empty spot on the stage of our performance on February 10th, 2020, and that spot will forever remain empty on our stage.
6 days after Sessions' death, Eastman was arrested in connection with the incident, and authorities executed a search warrant at his home as part of the investigation. During the search, deputies shockingly discovered the body of Heather Franks. After nearly 3 weeks of trial, Kevin Eastman was found guilty.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Kevin Dean Eastman, guilty of tampering with physical evidence.
He was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of tampering with a human corpse, and 2 counts of tampering with physical evidence.
We're just going to sentence you to a life sentence in the Colorado Department of Corrections without the possibility of parole.
Judge Marcelo Kopkow of the District Court sentenced Eastman to 2 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional 27 years in the custody of the Colorado Department of Corrections. He won't be getting out anytime soon. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can stay updated with our latest videos.